40 feet beneath the glassy surface of Pearl Harbor, in water so clear you can see shadows of the past, something impossible is happening right now. The USS Arizona, America's most sacred underwater tomb, is not resting in peace. She is dying, and what AI-powered drones discovered inside her shattered hull in December 2023 has triggered a classified emergency response that the Navy does not want you to know about. You know the official story. December 7, 1941, the surprise attack, the catastrophic explosion. The 1,177 sailors and Marines entombed forever. A tragedy memorialized, a grave sealed by presidential decree. The narrative we have repeated for 83 years is clean, respectful, and final, but here is what they never told you. When the National Park Service deployed cutting-edge underwater robotics for what was supposed to be a routine structural survey, the drones transmitted footage that made veteran Navy engineers go silent. What they captured was not just corrosion or decay. It was evidence of an active countdown to catastrophe. The Arizona is hemorrhaging nearly 9 quarts of oil every single day from fuel tanks containing over 500,000 gallons of volatile bunker fuel. And the steel cage holding that toxic reservoir is collapsing faster than anyone predicted. Yet the oil is not even the most disturbing discovery. Deep inside compartments where 1,177 men took their final breaths, the drones documented something that has never been seen in any shipwreck anywhere on Earth. The water itself has transformed into a chemical dead zone so toxic that not even bacteria can survive. Samples extracted from sealed compartments revealed compounds that only form when human remains decompose in the presence of specific metal alloys over 8 decades. The drones did not just map a ship, they photographed the molecular ghosts of over 1,000 men. And there is something else, something the official reports are not mentioning. The structural failure accelerating inside the Arizona is not random corrosion. The drone scans revealed fracture patterns consistent with deliberate weak points, design flaws that naval architects now believe were built into these battleships from the beginning. Flaws that turned America's most powerful warships into floating bombs. The USS Arizona was not just attacked on December 7, 1941. She was compromised before she ever left the shipyard. And what the drones just proved might rewrite everything we thought we knew about Pearl Harbor. December 7, 1941, 7:55 a.m. the first wave breaks over Oahu like a mechanical tsunami. 183 Japanese aircraft, their engines screaming, descend on Pearl Harbor with surgical precision. The USS Arizona sits at berth F7 along Battleship Row, her 33,000-ton hull gleaming in the early morning sun. Below decks, 1,512 men are waking up to what should have been another lazy Sunday in paradise. Nobody aboard knows they have exactly 8 minutes left before their ship becomes a tomb. At 8:06 a.m., everything changes. A single 1,760-pound armor-piercing bomb dropped from 10,000 feet by Lieutenant Commander Tadashi Kasumi's Nakajima bomber, punches through the Arizona's forward deck near turret number 2. The bomb does not explode on impact, it keeps going, penetrating deck after deck, ripping through steel like paper until it detonates deep inside the ship's forward powder magazine. What happens next defies human comprehension. The magazine contains over 1 million pounds of smokeless powder, the propellant for the Arizona's massive 14-inch guns. When the bomb ignites it, the explosion releases energy equivalent to roughly 1,000 tons of TNT in a fraction of a second. The blast is so powerful that it lifts the entire forward third of the battleship, all 10,000 tons of it, several feet out of the water before slamming it back down. Witnesses on Ford Island, half a mile away, are knocked off their feet by the concussion wave. The fireball erupts upward in a column of superheated gas and debris that climbs over 500 feet into the Hawaiian sky. Steel fragments weighing several tons are hurled hundreds of yards in every direction. Some land on Ford Island, others crash through the decks of neighboring ships. The blast registers on seismographs across Oahu as a magnitude 3.8 earthquake. Inside the Arizona, hell is instant and absolute. The forward section of the ship simply disintegrates. Men stationed in the bow are vaporized. Others are incinerated by flash fires that reach temperatures exceeding 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Bulkheads designed to contain flooding buckle and collapse. Watertight doors seal automatically, trapping hundreds of sailors in compartments that are already filling with seawater. The ship's electrical system fails, emergency lighting flickers and dies. Men fumble in absolute darkness, trying to find hatches that are already jammed or sealed by twisted metal. Some make it to the upper decks only to find themselves engulfed in burning oil. The fuel tanks have ruptured. Thousands of gallons of bunker fuel pour across the water's surface, igniting into inferno that spreads across Battleship Row like liquid napalm. Men jump into water that is on fire. They surface, gasping, their uniforms soaked in flaming oil. The USS Arizona sinks in 9 minutes. Not slowly, not with dignity. She drops like a stone, settling onto the harbor floor in 40 feet of water with her superstructure still visible above the surface, a twisted monument of smoking steel. In those 9 minutes, 1,177 men die. Some from the blast, some from fire, some from drowning. Some from injuries so catastrophic that death is a mercy. Navy divers arrive within hours. They work frantically, cutting through wreckage, trying to reach trapped survivors. They find none. Everyone still alive has already been pulled from the water. The divers manage to recover 107 bodies from accessible compartments. The rest, over 1,000 men, are sealed inside the wreck, trapped in spaces that are too dangerous, too unstable, too filled with burning oil to reach. Admiral Chester Nimitz makes the decision that will define the Arizona's legacy. She will not be salvaged. She will remain where she fell. The men inside will stay with their ship. It is not just practical, it is sacred. The Arizona becomes America's only active-duty warship designated as a war grave. Her crew is still officially listed as on duty. Sailors who served aboard the Arizona and survived can request to have their ashes interred inside the wreck when they die, rejoining their shipmates in eternal watch. For decades, that decision seemed final, honorable, the right thing to do. But what Admiral Nimitz could not have known in 1941 was what 8 decades of salt water would do to steel, fuel, and the bodies of 1,177 men. The Arizona did not rest peacefully. She began transforming into something nobody anticipated. A chemical time bomb with a countdown clock that is finally reaching zero. The first sign appeared in the late 1940s. Harbor workers noticed a faint oily sheen on the water's surface directly above the Arizona. It was minor, barely visible. A few drops, nothing to worry about, but the drops never stopped. They continued through the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, every single decade since the ship went down. The leak became part of the memorial's identity. Locals started calling it the Tears of the Arizona. Tour guides told visitors that the ship still bleeds oil, still mourns her dead. It became poetry, symbolism, a touching reminder of sacrifice. But it was never just poetry, it was a warning that nobody wanted to hear. The USS Arizona still contains approximately 500,000 gallons of bunker fuel. When she sank, her fuel tanks were nearly full. The Navy had been preparing the Pacific Fleet for deployment. Those tanks were loaded with thick, viscous oil, the kind that burns hot and long. Now, that fuel sits in corroding steel compartments 40 feet below the surface, held in place only by metal that is 83 years past its design lifespan. And every single day, roughly 9 quarts of oil leak from deteriorating seams and fractures into the harbor. Do the math, 9 quarts per day, that is over 2,500 quarts per year. Over 625 gallons annually. Multiply that by 83 years, and the Arizona has bled more than 52,000 gallons of oil into Pearl Harbor. To put that in perspective, the Exxon Valdez spilled 11 million gallons, but the affected area was thousands of square miles of Alaskan coastline. The Arizona's leak is concentrated in a single harbor barely 10 square miles in size. The contamination density rivals some of the worst oil spills in history, but it is happening so slowly that it barely registers as an environmental crisis. Until now, because the leak rate is accelerating. Engineers who have monitored the discharge since the 1980s have documented a disturbing trend. The volume of oil escaping the wreck is increasing year over year. In the 1980s, the leak was estimated at 5 to 6 quarts per day. By 2000, it had risen to 7 quarts. By 2023, it reached 9 quarts, and the projection curves are terrifying. If the current acceleration continues, the Arizona could be leaking over 15 quarts per day within the next decade. That is over 1,300 gallons per year pouring directly into one of the most ecologically sensitive harbors in the Pacific. But even that is not the worst-case scenario. The worst case is catastrophic tank failure. A sudden structural collapse that releases all 500,000 gallons at once. Engineers call this a blowout event, and the drone scans suggest it is no longer a question of if, but when. Pearl Harbor is home to endangered Hawaiian monk seals, green sea turtles, and over 400 species of fish, many found nowhere else on Earth. The harbor serves as a critical breeding ground for reef ecosystems that support the entire Hawaiian marine food web. It is also an active naval installation, home to guided missile destroyers, submarines, and support vessels worth billions of dollars. An uncontrolled release of 500,000 gallons of bunker fuel would devastate the ecosystem, contaminate the naval base, and cost an estimated $2 to $3 billion in cleanup. The National Park Service has known about the risk for decades. They have convened panels, commissioned studies, and debated options. But every solution runs into the same immovable obstacle. The USS Arizona is a war grave protected by federal law. Disturbing the wreck is not just legally complicated, it is morally unthinkable. How do you tell the families of 1,177 men that their loved one's final resting place must be violated to prevent an oil spill? So for years, the strategy has been delay. Monitor the leak, hope the tanks hold, pray that engineering estimates are wrong. But in December 2023, when the drones finally mapped the interior of the Arizona in detail never before achieved, the hope died. What the scans revealed was beyond anyone's worst predictions. If you are still here, you have just learned that over 1,000 men are entombed in a ship leaking 9 quarts of oil every single day into Pearl Harbor. Comment Arizona below if you are following this investigation. And if you have not subscribed, hit that button now and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. Your support helps us uncover the stories that official reports tried to bury. Now, let us talk about what those drones found inside the Arizona that has the Navy considering options they swore would never be on the table. December 2023, a joint operation between the National Park Service, the U.S. Navy, and the University of Hawaii Marine Sciences Department launches what they are calling the Arizona Digital Preservation Project. The mission is straightforward on paper: deploy remotely operated vehicles to create the first complete three-dimensional scan of the wreck. The goal is documentation, preservation planning, and structural assessment. Nobody expects what the drones are about to reveal. The ROVs they deploy are not ordinary underwater robots. These are OpenROV Trident units modified with AI-enhanced imaging systems, side-scan sonar arrays, and chemical sampling equipment capable of analyzing water composition in real time. Each drone is equipped with lighting systems powerful enough to illuminate the pitch-black interior compartments that have not seen sunlight since 1941, and each carries sensors that can detect structural weaknesses invisible to the human eye. The descent takes less than 2 minutes. At 40 feet, Pearl Harbor is shallow by diving standards. But the Arizona has always been off-limits to human divers except for official Navy operations. Too dangerous, too sacred, the drones face no such restrictions. They slip through openings in the wreckage, navigate corridors where men once walked, and peer into spaces where the dead still rest. The first drone enters through the blast crater where the bomb detonated. The opening is massive, a ragged tear in the deck nearly 30 feet across. The robot's lights cut through the darkness, revealing twisted steel beams, collapsed bulkheads, and sediment that has accumulated over 8 decades. The imaging system begins capturing thousands of photographs per minute, each one tagged with precise GPS coordinates and depth measurements. The AI processes the images in real time, building a three-dimensional model as the drone moves through the wreck. What that model reveals is structural devastation far worse than previous surveys suggested. The main fuel tanks are located in the lower hull, beneath the armor belt that once protected the Arizona's engine rooms. The drone scans show that the tank walls, originally half an inch thick, have corroded down to less than an eighth of an inch in critical areas. That is thinner than a credit card. Some sections have failed completely, leaving holes large enough to swim through. The only reason the tanks have not emptied already is sediment. Decades of silt and marine growth have partially plugged the breaches, creating a temporary seal that is holding back 500,000 gallons of pressurized fuel. But sediment seals are not permanent. They shift with currents, they erode. And the drone footage shows sediment actively moving inside the tank ruptures, slowly wearing away the biological plugs that are preventing catastrophic release. Engineers analyzing the scans perform stress calculations based on the measured wall thickness. Their conclusion is unanimous and terrifying. The fuel tanks will experience major structural failure within 10 to 20 years. Some estimates put the timeline as short as 5 years. When that failure occurs, the remaining fuel will escape in a matter of hours or days, not the slow drip that has characterized the leak for 8 decades. The second revelation is chemical. The drones are equipped to sample water from inside sealed compartments, areas of the ship that have been completely isolated from the harbor since the Arizona sank. When those samples are analyzed, the results are unlike anything ever documented in a marine environment. The water inside the Arizona is not seawater anymore. It has transformed into a toxic chemical soup. The pH measures for 0.2, meaning the water is as acidic as orange juice. Normal seawater has a pH of around 8.1. Dissolved oxygen levels are near zero. That means nothing aerobic can survive. No fish, no algae, not even bacteria. The water contains concentrations of iron oxides, copper sulfates, and manganese compounds at levels hundreds of times higher than surrounding harbor water. These metals have leached from the corroding hull, creating an environment so chemically hostile that it is effectively sterile. But the most disturbing findings are organic. Among the compounds detected in the water samples are specific amino acid chains, lipid breakdown products, and mineral composites that biochemists recognize immediately. These compounds form only under very specific conditions, when human soft tissue decomposes in an anaerobic environment in the presence of copper, the iron alloys over extended time periods. The drones had sampled water containing the molecular remnants of human remains. The third discovery is the one that appears in no official report, the one that the Navy has quietly classified. The drone imaging revealed fracture patterns in the Arizona's internal structure that do not match random corrosion. The failures are concentrated along specific bulkhead seams and structural joints. And the pattern is consistent with design weaknesses that naval architects now believe were present in multiple battleships of the Arizona S-class. Metallurgical analysis of steel samples recovered during previous surveys showed that the Arizona's hull plating contained higher than normal sulfur content, a characteristic that makes steel brittle under stress. Rivet analysis revealed the same problem that sank the Titanic 3 decades earlier: iron rivets used in areas where steel should have been specified. The Arizona, like many warships built in the 1910s, was constructed with cost-saving shortcuts that compromised structural integrity. The bomb that destroyed the Arizona should have caused massive damage, but it should not have obliterated an entire third of the ship. Naval ordnance experts reviewing the drone footage now believe the explosion's catastrophic effect was magnified by design flaws that termed the ship as own structure against her. The Arizona was not just attacked, she was vulnerable in ways her crew never knew. The drone data has forced the National Park Service and the Navy into a corner. For 83 years, the answer to what do we do about the Arizona has been simple: nothing, honor the dead, preserve the memorial. Let the ship rest, but that answer no longer works. The Arizona is failing, the environmental threat is real. And doing nothing is no longer respectful silence, it is negligent delay. The options are brutal, every single one involves compromise, controversy, and costs that make politicians flinch. Option 1: emergency fuel removal. Engineers drill into the fuel tanks from above, insert extraction pumps, and remove the remaining 500,000 gallons before catastrophic failure occurs. This is technically feasible. The operation has been successfully performed on other historic wrecks, most notably the USS Mississauga, a World War II oiler that was defueled in 2003 after leaking oil in Micronesian waters for 6 decades. The Mississauga operation cost $6 million and took 3 months. But the Arizona is not the Mississauga, the Arizona is a national shrine. Drilling into her hull feels like desecration. The fuel tanks are located directly adjacent to compartments containing human remains. Any operation risks disturbing those remains, which veterans groups and families find morally unacceptable, and the cost is exponentially higher. Estimates range from $75 to $150 million for a fuel extraction operation that would require specialized equipment, environmental safeguards, and years of planning. Option 2: structural encapsulation. Build a containment barrier around the entire wreck, essentially encasing the Arizona in a protective shell that prevents fuel release and slows corrosion. This would eliminate the environmental risk and potentially preserve the ship for centuries. But it would also fundamentally alter the memorial. The Arizona would no longer be visible beneath the water. The oil slick, the symbolic tears, would disappear. Visitors would see a concrete structure instead of the ship herself. Many believe this would erase the emotional connection that makes the memorial powerful. The Arizona's visibility is part of her message. Hiding her feels like hiding history. Option 3: chemical solidification. Inject specialized polymers and corrosion inhibitors into the fuel tanks, solidifying the remaining oil into a gel-like substance that cannot leak even if the tanks fail completely. This approach is less invasive than extraction and does not require removing fuel, but it is experimental. No one has attempted chemical solidification on a fuel load this large or this old. The long-term effectiveness is unproven. And if it fails, the situation could become worse, with solidified fuel breaking into chunks that are harder to contain than liquid. Option 4: monitor decline. Continue current monitoring, accept that catastrophic release will eventually occur, and prepare rapid response oil containment systems to deploy the moment tank failure happens. This option avoids disturbing the wreck but accepts environmental damage as inevitable. Cleanup costs would likely exceed $1 billion. The ecological impact would be severe, and the political fallout would be catastrophic. The debates are fierce. The National Park Service convened a committee of engineers, historians, ethicists, veterans, and family members. The meetings are contentious. Some families demand fuel removal, arguing that their loved ones died to protect the environment and would want the threat eliminated. Others insist that any disturbance of the wreck betrays the promise made in 1941 that the Arizona would remain a grave, untouched and sacred. Veterans groups are split. Some prioritize environmental protection. Others prioritize honoring the dead exactly as they fell. Environmentalists demand immediate action. Historians urge caution. And politicians, facing budgets strained by a dozen competing crises, ask why they should spend $150 million on a problem that might not become critical for another decade. Meanwhile, the Arizona bleeds 9 quarts per day, every single day. The countdown continues whether anyone is ready to decide or not. But here is what almost nobody is talking about. The USS Arizona is not unique. She is not even unusual. She is just the most visible example of a problem that spans the entire planet. There are thousands of fuel-laden World War II wrecks sitting on ocean floors right now: battleships, carriers, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, submarines, merchant vessels. Every major naval battle of the war left wrecks behind. And most of them still contain fuel, ammunition, and hazardous materials. They have been underwater for 80 years. The steel is corroding, the tanks are failing, and almost nobody is doing anything about it. The USS Saratoga sits in 90 feet of water in Bikini Atoll, a nuclear test site turned dive destination. She still contains fuel. The German battleship Tirpitz lies off the coast of Norway, partially salvaged, but still leaking oil. The Japanese carrier Kaga rests at the bottom of the Pacific near Midway with her fuel tanks intact. The SS Richard Montgomery, a Liberty ship loaded with 1,400 tons of explosives, sits in the Thames estuary just 50 miles from London. The wreck is so unstable that authorities have prohibited all diving and declared a 500-meter exclusion zone. Conservative estimates suggest there are over 8,500 potentially hazardous wrecks from World War II scattered across global waters. Most contain fuel, many contain explosives. Some contain both, and all of them are corroding on the same exponential timeline. The ships that sank in 1940 have now been underwater for 82 years. Steel does not last forever. Corrosion rates accelerate as thickness decreases. We are entering the window where mass failures become statistically inevitable. The international community has been paralyzed by the scale. These wrecks are in territorial waters of dozens of nations. Some are war graves protected by international treaty. Others are abandoned, ownership unclear, responsibility disputed. Nobody wants to pay. Nobody wants to take the lead. And so the problem grows. The United Nations Environment Program issued a report in 2020 estimating that World War II wrecks could release over 6 million tons of oil if catastrophic failures occur simultaneously. That would be an environmental disaster dwarfing the Deepwater Horizon spill. And it is not hypothetical, it is math. Steel corrodes. Tanks fail, time is running out. The USS Arizona has become the test case because she is American, she is accessible, and she is symbolically powerful. If the United States cannot figure out how to address the most famous wreck in its own waters, how will the world address the thousands of others? The drones have given us the data. The technology exists to solve this problem. What we lack is political will, international cooperation, and the courage to make hard choices that balance respect for the dead with responsibility to the living. The USS Arizona rests in 40 feet of water. Close enough to see from the surface, close enough that sunlight penetrates to her decks. Close enough that we have always believed we understood her, but we did not. Not until the drones showed us what 83 years have done to steel, fuel, and the men who never came home. The findings are chilling not because they expose a conspiracy. They are chilling because they expose a truth we have been avoiding. The Arizona is dying, the fuel is escaping. And the promise we made in 1941 to leave her undisturbed forever is a promise we may no longer be able to keep. The men who died aboard the Arizona on December 7, 1941, sacrificed everything to protect their country. They believed in a future worth defending. The greatest dishonor we could do to their memory is allowing their final resting place to become the source of an environmental catastrophe that we saw coming and chose to ignore. The drones have given us the warning, the clock is counting down. And the question is no longer whether we will act. The question is whether we will act in time. 1,177 men are still on duty aboard the USS Arizona. They have been waiting 83 years for us to honor them not just with words, but with action. The time for delay is over. The findings are chilling. But what would be truly terrifying is if we looked at this evidence and decided to do nothing. Share your thoughts in the comments. Should the fuel be removed, or should the Arizona remain and touch no matter the cost? Subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss what we uncover next. The USS Arizona has been silent for 83 years. The drones finally gave her a voice. Now it is our turn to listen.